All right. So in today's session, I want to keep building on some of the themes that we've been starting with this horse, some of the threads that we're developing with regard to his turnaround on the foot and getting him more confident with that, our transitions, especially downward transitions out of a lope, and just in general getting him more connected to our hands and just advancing his level of softness and collection and just continuing to build this lattice work of what I call under the hood skills, or the things that are kind of your safety net for maneuvers, things that will help us build maneuvers, things that will help us refine, tools to refine and troubleshoot and really put polish on existing maneuvers. And then also they form your safety net to where if you're struggling with something or you notice bad habits start to creep in, you can implement changes or you can implement fixes. But because the horse has that lattice work of knowledge of these different concepts we've built, they're able to process and understand what the correction even means, so that when you're doing things on a training level, it has a chance to sink in and become embodied knowledge instead of just a bunch of disjointed concepts that don't talk to each other. That's a primary thing about this horse's psychology, and what I call training for maneuvers. That classical school of thinking, it creates these buckets where, like, as the horse is riding around, they know to anticipate that a particular type of cues. Oh, that's the spin. The rider's asking me for a spin. That's the spin bucket. Oh, the rider's asking me for a circle. That's the circling bucket. Oh, I'm being asked to stop. That's the stopping bucket. But because these skills don't interconnect on a more meta level, it creates this disjointedness where, it's kind of like having a tips and tricks mindset instead of having a cohesive, holistic system where everything kind of fits together and it all relates to each other. I equate that to like a scientific model. A scientific model, like how we understand the solar system, for example. It does three things. Number one, it explains observable phenomena. In our case, it allows us to make sense of the horse's actions. If there's something going wrong, we know where that's coming from. So it's a diagnostic and an explanatory tool. What it also does, a scientific model provides structure. So it structures the existing knowledge into a cohesive framework, right? We know, for example, that the way gravity works and how it relates to the moon orbiting the Earth is what also creates the tides going in and out and other weather patterns that we can observe. So all these things become a framework of knowledge that gives us understanding. And then because we have a model, we also have predictive powers. We know when the next solar eclipse or lunar eclipse is going to be. We know what the general tides will be like or what the moon will be like on any given night because we understand how these systems work. And that's very much the same with horse training. When people lack a cohesive program and that interconnected meta level of knowledge, everything is always a tips and tricks mindset where if the horse's stop is complete shit, they're like, well, how do I get the stop better? You want to think of those maneuvers not in terms of isolated bits and pieces of knowledge that you have to fix or tweak or tinker with. You want to think of those as emergent properties. What do I mean by emergent? If I go out with my tractor bucket and I scoop a bunch of soil out of the field or out of my pasture, let's say I skim the top turf off, I rip the grass out, I dig down to just the dirt, and I take a big scoop of dirt and I go dump it somewhere. Well, after it sits there for a while, because of the moisture that's in that and the seeds that are already in that from grasses and plants, etc., plus animals, worms, insects interacting with that dirt, over time, grass and plants will sprout up from that dirt that used to be bare. Now it's growing something. That growth is emergent. It just comes out of the soil naturally. We don't have to do anything really to kickstart it. It just is. It's part of the natural systems of how the world works. That's kind of how I think about maneuvers in terms of horse training. The more higher level and polished skills in a good program are an emergent property that just kind of forms naturally out of the baseline of skills and muscle memory that you teach at that lower level. Everything I'm working on is the soil out of which great things are grown. So here in my warm-up, I'm just reviewing our bending with vertical. I'm being very casual about it, obviously. This horse, even just over the last couple of rides, he feels very soft. Occasionally, you'll still see him kind of, test my hands, argue with my hands slightly, or get a little bit tense. But for the most part, he's very willing. He's getting more willing all the time to kind of adapt and conform himself to whatever mold or shape I am trying to frame with my hands and legs. So let's start, as part of our warm-up, now that we've done that, let's do a little bit of our turnaround on the foot exercise. While he's more fresh, this is a great way to work on an area that's extremely important, and it has roots that connect to stops, transitions, everything. We need to get this little skill better because it scales to so many other different things. So let's see where he's at with that today and just kind of let him tell us where he is mentally and physically, and then adapt to what he gives us here. So I'm going to start like I did in the last session, just kind of developing a little shape at a standstill here. I'll start off the fence for today. Maybe I'll walk him forward again, because I want to, once this skill is established from a standstill, I actually want to turn this into a transition exercise. I call it my stop on whoa exercise, where I will say the word whoa and then take the horse into this style of turn to teach better muscle memory around what the word whoa means. It means engage your hind end. And that's what this turn is creating. It's challenging him to activate his balance in that way. So here I'm just going to pick up shape. Now I'm going to draw him into it here. That was already better than the start of the last session. I'm going to let him out of it. There's still an inkling in there initially, like when he feels that neck rein come on or he feels that outside leg come on, he initially thinks about going forward a lot. But he kind of caught himself just then and thought better of it. And that's how you know, when you get little reactions like that of the horse initially having the wrong gut reaction, but then catching themselves and self-correcting. While they might not be perfect, you're on the right track. The key with this is just keeping it very relaxed, encouraging that behavior in him to where when he gets off balance or he starts going forward too much, that he catches himself. That's why in a context like this, you have to be very, very patient, because if you try to rush it, you don't give the horse a chance to process it mentally. They just feel trapped and claustrophobic, and they're trying to exit the situation as quick as they can. You have to it's a concept I refer to as holding space, or what a writer or a screenplay author would refer to as letting the moment breathe a little bit. When you have a profound challenge here, you don't just gloss over that and race to the next thing. You kind of linger on that for a little bit so that it sinks in more. Now here, all I'm doing, because he's a little tense, is I'm just kind of waiting on him. Again, just kind of letting that moment breathe, keeping the parameters the same, but just holding space for him here till he gives me something a little bit better. Okay, because again, he oscillates between being too backward and too forward, which is normal. 99% of horses are going to have that issue. So I'm just waiting until he kind of finds his balance here and is settled into that and is a little bit more comfortable. Okay. He's still wanting to be fast and kind of tense about it. Here, he's questioning okay, what do you actually want me to do? Right? And again, you got to let little moments like that breathe. What a lot of people would do right then is kick on the horse just in that moment of the horse kind of stalls out because they're confused. And they're like, okay, wait a minute. What is actually the case here? What do you want me to do? They're not sure. A lot of people would hammer on the horse in that moment and kind of scare him, or just make the horse resentful about it. You got to be good about letting moments like that breathe, where you're not necessarily backing off, but you're just kind of, okay. He thought a little bit more that time. Not perfect, but I'll let him have it. We do have to leave a little breadcrumb trail where he realizes there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is a purpose to this. If I do this movement or I make my body feel this type of way, I get a release of pressure. He needs to know that there's a way that he can win the game still. Okay, so he's immediately thinking forward, which is normal. I'm just using that outside rein as a break. Okay, that time he had better thoughts. He thought more about getting back into himself, and there was a little bit more commitment as far as using that hind end to kind of create a platform for himself to turn. We'll do that a couple more times here. The better he gets with this, the better he will stop, and I'll show you guys that. But if you've seen the video on Stop on Whoa, you already know where I'm going with this. This gives me a really great tool to get the horse using and holding the ground better in the stop without creating habits of braciness or resistance in the front end. Okay. It's softer, it's smoother. Still not quite the feeling I want, but it's closer, okay? Now there, again, he's trying to turn it into a spin. Just going to set it up again. He either goes way too much backward or way too much forward. I basically want him to find a balance point where it's neither one, it's just centered. He's centered, sitting on that outside hip, sitting into it, and he's more steady there. Okay? I'm keeping that outside leg close, not really buried in him, but just kind of pressing, because I'm actually trying to dull him up slightly to that, because he goes from not much interaction to like trying to jump off that and turn away from it quick with his shoulders. And I don't want to be losing his front end like that. Like there, he's just trying to turn fast. So I'll catch him, catch him, catch him. There we're backing up too much. There we're forward too much. He's trying to spin on me. Let me take a hold of you. The whole issue here, or part of it, I guess, is that I have no ability to touch him with that outside rein. As soon as I bring that indirect rein on, he's trying to take that shoulder away from me. I have no ability to create contact or stay with him there, because he won't let me touch him. He won't let me maintain that pressure. He's been taught, you feel that, you get the fuck off of it. That's basically the way he's been thinking up to now. What I want to show him is, no, stay with it. Let me maintain a little connection with you, because that gives me a line of communication that's more direct, and I can actually tell you things, as opposed to just kind of stumbling around in the void with no aids and no guidance. That's the issue with that paradigm of, like, if you stay in that mindset well beyond what we need to, of always working out of an avoidance of pressure, and you don't teach the horse to start going into that acceptance phase, it starts to become a liability to you. That big focus on get off of it, get off of it, get off of it. You know, when I pick up on you, I want to feel feather lightness. I want to feel nothing but air. That mentality gets you in trouble down the road, because then you can't add any inputs or really communicate with the horse on a more subtle level, because you have no direct line of contact with them. The second you go to take the slack out of the reins, they're thinking about being in trouble, and they're just worried about ducking and hiding and getting off of it, as opposed to listening. And like we talked about before, reading how much intensity and pressure you're bringing to the table and letting that inform their effort level, as opposed to taking those decisions away from you and going 100 miles an hour when you asked for like 10 miles an hour. All I'm doing in those moments where he gives me something better is I'm kind of walking out what I call, kind of a palate cleanse, so that he's not just trapped there forever, and then we go back into it. That was immediately a better thought in terms of how he shifted his weight and how he moved himself. Okay, a little bit backward, but I'm feeling softness here and a degree of relaxation and just acceptance that wasn't there the last couple times. I really like that. You can imagine how, if you've got a horse that the moment they feel neck rein, they're like shirking and ducking off of it. Okay, you could imagine a scenario where you're trying to run that horse down and you're trying to add a little bit of draw on the reins to get that horse pushed up to the bridle, create lift, and help them go to the ground the proper way for a sliding stop. You can imagine that if you've got a horse that is in a frame of mind of trying to get off that and disappear from that pressure, rather than allow you to bring that on and kind of stay with you, you could see how that would create massive issues. It would also create massive issues, like let's say if the stop wasn't particularly good and you go to pick up and correct that horse, they're more worried about the very fact that you're correcting them than they are thinking about what they did wrong. They're so preoccupied with just escaping the pressure, they don't connect the correction to what just happened. So, for example, let's say I run this horse down, he stops poorly or he stops on his front end, and I go to take him into a turn like this to try to get him, like basically remind him, hey, this is what your body should feel like. You need to activate your hind end. He's not even thinking on that level. He's just trying to escape the situation. So it inhibits your ability to teach anything, is what happens. That's why building that soil layer is so important. You can see he's like grunting and he's trying really hard. That's why I'm just staying really patient here. I don't really need very much more effort and intensity. He's already offering that. It just needs to be channeled in the right ways. That's good there. Let's draw him into it. Again, I'm bringing that outside rein on. I don't even mind right now if there's a little hesitation, because at least he's letting me touch him as opposed to just trying to hide off of it. Okay? Yes, stay in there. Now we're not, there we go. No, don't think about a spin. Think about getting back into yourself, getting on your outside hind foot. That's going to be important. People that are really good colt starters, and I agree with this when they say that, I talk about this a lot too, they emphasize the importance of teaching a horse how to learn. And what that looks like for me is that across your training, you kind of take the horse through 3 evolutions in their understanding of pressure and cues and the rider's aids. The first stage is just pure avoidance of pressure. You're on a green colt, you pick up the rein and you apply pressure and you tip their nose to the right. They move their feet to the right and follow that feel. You drop the rein, they get a release of pressure. Okay, so basically just through, because horses, they're seeking comfort, and so we're deliberately creating those contrasts of pressure and release, approach and retreat. We're working within the framework of their psychology, basically creating a little puzzle, and then when they find the right answer, they get a total release of pressure, and they basically just get left alone as the reinforcement for that skill that they just did. Through repetition, they get pretty good at it. But you have to migrate beyond that mindset eventually, because again, you're still fundamentally training out of an avoidance of pressure mindset. You're using the horse's instinct to avoid pressure, or to seek relief, rather, as a teaching tool. Okay, but at some point, you have to level that up and you move into what I call an acceptance mindset. The three levels are avoidance, acceptance, seeking. And those describe the qualities of what's going on inside the horse's mind in response to the rider's cues and pressure, and what we as the trainer are releasing to, or rewarding, or trying to culture and nurture. So in the avoidance mindset, it's just direct, black and white pressure and release. And typically the releases of pressure, when the horse performs the skill correctly, are instant and total. You know, like some trainers, for example, when they start doing basic softening and suppling exercises, they talk about a hot potato type of release of the rein. Like you pick up, you get the horse bending, say, on a circle, forward and around. When the horse softens to your inside rein and leg, you drop the rein or you slide it down toward your knee. You're basically completely taking away that stimulus as the reinforcement for that horse performing the skill. So the horse is learning through the total release of pressure. At some point, though, you have to migrate to acceptance, where in a scenario like that, you are staying in the exercise longer. And just because the horse is physically soft or physically going through the motions, you don't instantly release right away. You hesitate and stay in there until there's a deeper level of mental acceptance and relaxation. So they're not just physically going through the motions. The horse is mentally understanding, okay, I'm not in trouble. Theoretically, I could do this longer, and I'm not going to be punished for it. And what they start to realize is that pressure is not an enemy. It's not like a chaotic, like claustrophobic walls closing in. It's just a call for engagement. So when we start timing our releases of pressure to something beyond just physically going through the motions, we start reinforcing that mental acceptance in the horse. And there's things we can do on a training level that really stimulate that. You know, I talked about the hot potato release of the rein. Well, when we move to an acceptance mindset, we start, instead of just dropping the rein or snapping our fingers open, we ease our hands forward, right? And allow the horse to kind of follow that extension, where we just draw that process out to where we maintain a little connection as the horse gets a release of pressure. So it's not instant and total, it's more gradual and kind of controlled. With him here, I'm still letting him walk out and we're doing those little palate cleanses because I don't want him to get super frustrated. The more confident he gets, not only will I be able to keep him in this turn longer, but my hands will start to maintain a connection with him even throughout this process and then afterward. Okay? Okay, now there, mechanically, it was good. Like, he was stepping the way I want, but he's rushing it. So I'm just trying to create little sequences like that where he realizes this is more what I want, but not just trying to leave it. You know, he's still got to run into a little barrier there if he tries to shoot forward. Let me maintain a little connection with you. Let me stay with you, rather than just, you know, because if you don't move beyond that avoidance mindset, the horse starts to basically see the rider as a liability. You can't talk to the horse. You can't cue them. You can't ask them for things, because any input that you try to give them, they're fundamentally thinking about, how can I escape? How can I get the human to basically shut up and leave me alone? Because they see pressure as a problem. We need to get the horse understanding pressure is just a call for engagement. When they have that realization and they have that more settled mindset across everything that we do, that's where the final layer comes in, and we move to that seeking layer, where we're actually trying to get the horse encouraged and even stimulate in some ways. We'll stimulate them to look for engaging with us, look for us to ask them to do things or maybe offer things themselves. I talk, for example, about a horse reaching for the rider's hand. That doesn't mean rooting their nose and escaping the bridle. It means that horse is seeking connection with you. They're basically asking, hey, what do you want me to do here? How do you want me to be in this moment? They start to look to the human to answer those types of questions. They, instead of seeing the rider as a liability, they see you as a source of structure and someone who makes existence make sense for them. They start looking to you more when they're unsure or when they're tense. And that's what we all want to get to, right? That kind of two-way communication is like the Holy Grail. That's what everybody in horsemanship, I don't care what discipline, that's what we are all seeking. What we need, though, is some kind of a structure to make sense of how to get there, because everybody tries to go for the engagement and the seeking first, or acting like we should be able to get to that right away. But then if you look at their training, they're training out of an avoidance mentality, always. There, he actually thought for a couple seconds about, all right, how do I need to orient my balance to do this? Like, this sucks. It's kind of hard. How do I need to shift myself to do this better? And he thought about it, and he did it. And I let him walk out of it. Now, again, it's only a couple steps. Like, we need to keep building on this. It's nowhere near where it needs to be, really. But if we get things like this solidified, that's what's going to create longevity for this horse, both mentally and physically. And I talk a lot about, because I've been around the block. I was actually decent. I've seen, I've been around the block a few times. I didn't just fall off the turnip truck yesterday. I've been in the performance horse industry a long time. And I've seen things like, for example, you got a horse that's been trained for maneuvers. They come from that more old school mindset. And let's say it's coming up on futurity time, it's crunch time, and they're not stopping well. Okay, so what does that trainer do? They do some epic hell rides where they're just focused on that one bucket of skills, driving that horse up, stopping, over and over again. Maybe they're fencing him 500 million times, trying to get his ass in the ground, trying to get him to hold the ground, trying to get it to not be shitty. Well, then what happens? Well, you risk blowing the horse's mind up. You risk blowing up their body. And I've seen that a lot, horses just having their hocks blown the hell out because it was crunch time. And that trainer didn't have any tools in the toolbox. They didn't have any soil. And they're like, I want to grow some beanstalks now. It's like, well, that shit takes time. These are emergent things. You can slam bang some horses and they'll be okay with it, especially if they're super good-minded and they're talented enough to succeed in spite of a bad program. But one like this needs that structure. He needs a lattice work of these mental models and concepts so that he can make sense of his world. Otherwise, he's just lost and worried all the time about being in trouble. He never understands that the whole reason we're using pressure, the whole reason we're cueing him is because we're trying to create a better position to facilitate the task or facilitate the maneuver than he would give us if just left to his own devices. We're trying to help him. Right now, he doesn't realize that, but he will. He's starting to, anyway. There. Good. Good boy. We're going to just keep chipping at this till we're staying in this longer and longer. Let's go to the left. We haven't done any to the left yet. What you'll see a lot of times, too, when it's why we want to have that cadence in our training of move out and impulsion and steering versus like suppling and more body control and transition work, the more concentrated training, stuff like this, you got to balance them out. Because if you just focus too much on this more acidic technical stuff, you create a lot of frustration. However, even if you are balancing it ideally, when that horse is still in the learning phase, don't be surprised if like you see some frustrated behavior. Like when a horse is really trying to process this stuff, especially when it's new or it challenges their previous paradigm, you'll see things like a lot of mouthiness, for example, on the bit, or you will see things like, shaking their head, or like in this horse's case, he's kind of, he wants to cock his head to the side kind of awkwardly, or some horses might, snort and shake their head and neck a million times, even though there's no bugs around. Or they might, kind of stomp or even try to paw with their front feet. As you're riding around, they'll stop and like paw the ground once or twice. It's just normal behaviors of that animal that's under a certain level of stress. And that's kind of normal in the learning phase. Like, we obviously don't want to overdo it, but don't be scared or worried if you start seeing some of those things temporarily. As the horse realizes what we want, they'll get more settled and relaxed. Horses and humans don't learn perfectly. When was the last time you learned a really difficult new skill that didn't make you feel uncomfortable or stressed? There's almost nothing worth doing unless you're like God, so you have massive amount of gift and talent for it. There's almost nothing worth doing that's difficult that isn't stressful on some level to learn at first. There's an idea in the horse world that we should have stress-free training, and that's just not reality. Horses don't learn anything if there's not at least a little bit of compelling stimulus. They might learn something through passive experimentation or play, but for our purposes, that takes too long and it's too indirect. It doesn't really give us any kind of communication tools. That's like a horse learning to open their stall gate because they were fiddling with the latch one day because the metal tasted good, and then they realized the latch opened, so then they learned how to do that. That type of indirect training is not something that we can usually create on a day-to-day level. Now, in our overall, like how we design our program and everything, we are indirect in many ways and in many things that we do. But make no mistake, that stuff takes time. It's like learning through osmosis versus what we're doing here, which is more direct. Do that again. Now, to the left here today, he's a lot more backward-minded. He's almost wanting to back up too much, but he definitely feels better this way than to the right. Like, he's starting better. His balance is better. Like, that feels actually pretty decent. It ain't perfect, but there's a definite improvement there already, just in the last couple sessions. What I'm thinking of doing here, even though, the turnaround to the right, the turn on the foot to the right, is not quite where I want it yet. We're getting there. But I'm thinking this might be a good thing I'm going to start doing my plan of turning this into a transition just out of a jog. That way it keeps it more relaxed. It changes things up enough to break some new ground mentally, get him more engaged. And it'll also be very apparent to him what the right feeling is versus swimming around and being off balance. So what I'm going to start doing here is just a little bit of like super slow-mo stop on whoa drill. Okay? So all I'm going to do is I'm going to trot him across here, and then as I say the magic word, I'm going to pick up and smoothly draw him into that turn on the foot. Whoa. So smoothly draw him into it, and when he gets to that positioning again, where he's balanced, he's kind of sitting on that outside hip. Okay, not terrible, but he did try for me there, and he's really trying to get soft. So let him have that. Let him walk out of it, and then we'll trot here. If he does a really good one, I'll actually stand there, and let him rest for 5 or 10 seconds before I move on. Ooh. Just tipping his nose here. Just trying to smoothly corral that energy. You can see how wide I'm having to keep that outside hand still. There we go. Again, using it as a brake to slow him down because he wants to just rip away from that neck rein. He wants to turn hard, but this is not a spin. This is a turn on the foot. They're fundamentally different in terms of what we want to feel. You can think of this as being analogous to like a cutting horse that stops, gets loaded up, and then turns and drives off the other way. Just going to gradually just kind of corral him. You can see how we're just backing up, but that's okay. I'm going to stay in the turn here. Okay, because it's not a backing up contest, although I do like the fact that he's thinking back instead of forward. Okay, no, don't just turn faster. Get yourself balanced more. That's one of the fundamental problems with maneuver-based training, there we go, is you're using momentum instead of balance. What do I mean by that? Well, let's use a really common example. There's a way to teach a flying lead change where you lope a circle around, and then as you get to the middle of the arena, you do a quick turn and kind of kick the horse the other way. So you make a big figure 8, essentially. And because you're traveling at speed and you have that quick change of direction, the momentum of it can kick the horse into the new lead. So it's technically a flying lead change if you stay in a lope the entire time, but you're using momentum and speed to like run and kick the horse into it. And the fact that they're leaning their body as they're loping around and going through that middle part, that is what kicks them into the new lead. But is that balanced? The answer is no. You're just using momentum to like run and jump the horse into it. Balance would be you can do that on a straight line, and by shifting the horse's body with your legs, you create the same effect that on a less well-trained horse you can use momentum for. Using balance is always superior to using momentum to just get things done. And that's basically what I want to teach him is like, you know, this connects to our stops, it connects to our transitions. A momentum-focused approach, there we go. Good boy. I'm actually going to let him stand there and rest for a second. That was the first one that he did that felt like it was getting toward an A or an A+ level. So I'm just going to pause here. But think about a momentum paradigm way of teaching a sliding stop. What would that entail? Something like running a horse directly at a fence and then keeping them held straight so that at the last freaking moment, that horse has to stop and get down on their hocks in order to not slam into the fence, right? I can remember growing up, one of the first reining trainers I ever met and worked with, he was an old school guy that when he was growing up, and reining wasn't even a thing back then, but to teach a horse to do a sliding stop, they had like a bunch of thicket at one end of his dirt lane at his place in Nebraska. And so he would get like a leather quirt or a bat and kind of spank the horse on the hindquarters and drive them forward and get them loping really fast. And if they didn't stop, they were going to go into that thicket and prick their face on that thicket, right? So that was how he would train horses to do a sliding stop. That is a momentum-based way of trying to do what I'm trying to accomplish through balance, meaning that the horse knows how to use his hindquarters, and I don't have to use momentum or some trick or hack like that to get him engaged in the right ways. Basically, I don't have to run the horse into it. I don't have to trick them into it because they understand what the job is. Let's do a couple more of those little transitions. Just going to do one right here quick in front of the camera. Ooh, just smoothly drawing him. This is his bad way here. Okay. I'm going to let you have that even though it wasn't perfect. That was the first time, though, that I didn't feel a lot of like twitching, chaotic energy under my legs. He felt more settled and let me take a hold of him there. So I'm actually going to reward that. Okay. All right, let's do that a couple more times. What I'll start doing also is drawing him into it a little bit sooner. Ooh. So I'll try to make it like one smooth, like draw, kind of smoothly capture and redirect that energy and try to make that into one movement. Just kind of blend them together, make it a little bit smoother. Now, obviously, we talk about intent-based training. If you've got a horse that's real lazy, that's dull, that's heavy, you're going to be more in a mindset of wanting things to be sharper, wanting things to be snappier and more immediate. You're going to be using more pressure than I am to get that horse's attention. In his case, I'm dialing back that intensity and trying to emphasize smoothness. Okay, so you just change the intent to what the horse needs. Ooh, there, I brought that pressure on. Now I'm drawing him in there. Now, why am I doing that? Because I need to start showing him, just like we talked about, that isn't a threat. I want him to basically associate through habit and through muscle memory I'm creating with this exercise and others, that when he feels that come on, he needs to be thinking about softness, relaxing into the cue or into the pressure, not getting tense and guarded. So if you think about it, from the time that pressure came on, he never got a true release until what? In this case, he's doing that turn on the foot move, but he's soft and he's balanced and he's relaxed about it. Horses are masters of pattern recognition and anticipation. So if we use that to our advantage and we're consistent about that every time, what mental mode is he going to be in when he starts to feel me pick up on him? He's going to be thinking about the ultimate end product and how he feels in his body when he's more relaxed. And that's exactly the association that I'm trying to build here. Going back to my analogy about the soil, this is that in a nutshell. The better he gets with this too, we're going to unlock more of his natural ability for the stop and for the rollback. But just yet, he's not quite settled enough, so we got to take our time and build this. Okay. Find it here. He's thinking, he's trying. Like when I'm just staying in here with him, it's because he's not doing anything wrong. He's honestly trying to figure out his balance. So I'm just holding space, letting that moment breathe until he makes it happen. Okay. There. Get through yourself, though. Like he steps on himself and he gets worried because he thinks he's doing something wrong or he's going to be in trouble. He's thinking about this with the framework of what he knows, which is what the spin should feel like. He knows if he's not taking a correct forward step in the spin, or if he's not reaching, if he's stepping on himself or stepping short or stepping behind, he knows he's going to get a reprimand for that. So when I take him into this move, and he's still thinking spin, and then he kind of clacks his feet together like that, he gets worried, and then he tries to rush. So I'm just holding my position there and trying to show him that, no, contrary to what you're expecting, you're not going to get an increase of pressure. If anything, I'm going to back off slightly and let you kind of process the situation. Is basically what I'm trying to show him here. Just trot off again somewhere, do the same thing. We'll go back to the right since that's the side he struggles on. Ooh. Take a hold. Again, I can feel him, like he's not letting me really connect that to the neck rein. So there's times that I even deliberately push him forward with my inside leg like this to get him like reconnected into that neck rein, like kind of on purpose, making him feel that tension and then showing him that he's not in trouble. He can allow that to come on. In fact, it's there to help him is what I'm really trying to do. I'm trying to provide some structure there. But if he's hiding from that and won't let me do that, it's not going to work. Ooh. Smoothly bringing that on. Same thing there. Instead of hiding from it, let me take a hold of you. Horses they don't know right from wrong. They only know kind of what they're allowed to get away with or sort of what the parameters have been based on past experiences. So this is kind of a slow process of just showing him there's more to the world than you knew. You thought you had humans figured out. There's more stuff that you haven't been shown yet. Because I'm doing something he doesn't expect. He's immediately thinking spin. We're doing something totally different. And it's kind of, it's showing him a new world, basically. There, I really liked how he kind of reached for me slightly. I'm going to push him into the neck rein and then back into our turn. Good, just to get that connected. That was a lot better there. I'm going to leave the left alone. We need to do a few more to the right. That was pretty damn good in terms of his mentality around it. Now, ultimately, I'd want that to be more immediate, like right from when I pick up, but he's getting there. Let's trot on again. Go back to the right this time. Rein pressure comes on, smoothly corralling him. That was a really good response from him just then. He let me take my hand across, at least at the start, without trying to rush away. That was definitely better. I work with so many people and have coached so many people who get so self-conscious and worried about the very fact that their horse struggles with this type of stuff. They think they're doing something wrong. There's kind of this element in horse culture because horses are so high stakes. They're big, expensive, dangerous animals. They take so long to train, and this stuff is so technical, and there's a steep learning curve that we all kind of implicitly understand that if we're doing like the wrong things, we're just creating a lot more cost and wasted time for ourselves. And people are so worried about not wanting to do the wrong thing and mess the horse up, they hold themselves back from plunging into these areas where you have to. Like, he's lacking structure in a lot of areas. We have to go into that unknown and start building some structure. And that inherently is going to be a bit of a messy process. It's going to take some time. It's going to require you to be very smart and structured in your thinking. Because when you've got a horse that has only known, kind of chaotic or disconnected bits of info, you have to be that source of stability that starts to string everything together and show them a new way. And so if you're not confident in yourself, if you're sitting there doubting and questioning and you've got that hesitant, unsure energy, what do you think that does to the horse, right? So that's like the best sales pitch I can give for finding a program. That was pretty good, actually. Because whether it's my program or even some, you could go buy a pattern book at the thrift store for $2 and start trying to practice the patterns in your rides. You open the book to page 27 and there's a little trot pole pattern, and you work on that a couple rides in a row with your horse. you might not be thinking on a deep technical level about balance and everything like we are with this horse here, but just because you've created some structure and you've introduced a framework, you've introduced a goal, you've introduced an anchor point and a focal point of purpose in your riding, you inherently, just in your energy and presence in that horse, are going to radiate more of a settled, consistent presence that they can pick up on. So, you don't have to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars for my program to start getting the benefits of having a little more structure. But what my program does is we add on to that with a lot of mental models and training concepts that are very sophisticated but very simple. There you see he stepped on himself and he pulled that bell boot off. Okay, that's kind of what I'm talking about. But you notice he did that. Did he have a big herky-jerky reaction? No. And I like that because, like I was saying before, a lot of times he does that. He steps on himself and then gets super worried. So the fact that he let me stay in there for a minute, that's good. I'm going to put that bell boot back on. And then we'll get going. Pick up smoothly. There, I've got some feel on the neck rein. There, I braked him. Aha, yes. Okay, he started to think in the right ways. Let's make one other pass at it here. That's it. Good boy. Good boy. Again, knowing how to just hold space, let the moment breathe, you can uncover some shit and get another try or two where if you timed it badly and put too much pressure, you'd pop the horse out of that mentality of wanting to try, and then they just resist and try to leave. It's kind of a weird analogy, but I was watching a podcast, or listening to a podcast rather, Theo Vaughn this past weekend, and he had a MMA fighter that was talking about his childhood and kind of some of the traumatic stuff that he went through. And he started getting emotional during the interview. And Theo is a master of just knowing how to hold space, So when somebody's being vulnerable like that, if you just make a half-assed comment of like, oh, dude, that's so crazy, that's so wild, it makes that person clam back up, right? They don't want to share anymore. But if you just know how to hold space and just be present and let that energy develop in the room, that person they'll feel comfortable opening up more. And he did a fantastic job of that. And I saw that and I was like, that is the perfect analogy for a lot of situations in horse training, where if people just know how to, not that you totally disengage and become passive. Don't get it wrong. I'm not saying that you should be like just completely passive and be a non-factor sitting there doing nothing. We know we have to be an active leader for our horse. But in certain vulnerable moments where they're confused or they're trying for you, there's a certain way of just holding that space where you're not leaving the moment, you're not quitting the exercise or what you're doing, but you're just allowing them to mentally wrap their head around what you're trying to do and process what's happening. A lot of people kill that. You see that. A good concrete example is trying to get the horse to cross a bridge on the trail. A lot of people try to ease their horse up to the very start of the bridge, and the horse, it actually makes an attempt to do a safety check. Like it gets down, it gets its head low, it starts trying to sniff that bridge, maybe put a leg on it, maybe paw at it. It's just trying to verify that it's solid, The horse is trying to protect itself. And right in that moment, where that horse is in that vulnerable spot and doing that safety check, the human starts kicking on him, spanking on him, trying to get over that obstacle. I call it the touchdown or the goal line mentality. They're right on the edge of that bridge, and the human is thinking, well, we're so close, just step on it, just go. And they start forcing it. If the horse isn't ready yet, that'll cause them to just go into total refusal, try to pull back, race backward, etc. Where if you just let the moment breathe a little bit and have a little bit of freaking feel, that horse will process it themselves without you forcing it. Knowing how to read situations like that and not do something that wrecks that process is a skill of horsemanship. Like that is one of the difference makers between people that just never get it and never have success with horses versus those that do. Pick up smoothly. Don't just turn. Get back on your hindquarters a little bit. Engage yourself. Good. That felt more solid. It feels like he's starting to gain confidence there. Let's do one more. If it's that good, again, we'll leave it as is for today. He's looking at this beam of light down here on the wall, so I'm going to deliberately just take an indirect pass by it. As I do, I'm going to do a little bending with vertical here just to bring his focus back to me, but let him verify what that is. Then we'll go into our move. Pick up. Good. He let me touch him. He let me bring that neck rein on. Good. He actually started licking and chewing as we were turning. He's definitely more relaxed on that one. I'm going to let him have a big break there. Nice job, buddy. Now, the way to advance this is for the time, we're going to keep doing that thing where we do that skill in isolation, just out of a standstill or a walk. Then we'll keep doing more of these transitions. Eventually, I want to be able to do this out of a lope too. But for today, we'll just stick with what we built at a trot, and we'll just keep improving on that. The last thing I'm going to do here is actually bending with vertical, but just on a bigger circle and scale that up to the lope. We'll do some loping circles, and in that, I'm just, number one, getting him soft, obviously, getting him centered, and I'm trying to encourage him to reach for my hands a little bit more, not be so over-bridled, not hide his nose from me. We've already started that theme. We're just going to keep developing that thread also. So I'll go down to this end here, and we'll circle both ways, and we'll work on that a little bit. This ideally shouldn't take too long, but we'll see what his energy level is. If he's tense or worried, I'll stay in there longer. Otherwise, I just want to check this box, and it'll be a good way, now that we're getting later into the ride, it'll be something good for him mentally to get loped, move out a little bit here. So we'll start at a jog. I'm just going to jog a couple big circles with the same type of shape and creating that centered feel that I'm going to ask for at a lope too. Because if there's any waywardness there, I need to be fixing that right now. It's going to be even worse at a lope. So we'll get this dialed in. When he feels centered, he feels relaxed, then we'll lope. It's worth mentioning again, though, that depending on the horse's energy level and personality, you might have to be a lot firmer. And I certainly am, in some of the other videos, you see me really get after horses in certain moments. And, so I don't want you to think, just based on this one horse here, that I'm always so patient and passive and overly methodical with everything. I'm just doing that because that's the approach the horse needs. Other horses need you to be sharper, need you to be more crisp and demanding and black and white. You need to kind of light a fire under their belly, so to speak. This horse needs structure and he needs confidence in the sense of we need to build that acceptance of pressure that I touched on earlier. Some horses, in order to get them accepting or seeking contact, you got to motivate them first. You got to be firmer. You got to light a fire under their tail and give them a reason to give a shit. This horse gives too much of a shit. We're trying to bring that down a peg, whereas with others, we're trying to elevate their energy level. All right, let's do the same thing at a lope. So I'm going to alternate here between kind of cruising with him pitched away versus me picking up, in moments where I feel like he's prone to getting lost, or to just check my softness and then easing back to him when he gets centered up. Same thing here. I'm picking up and smoothly releasing, just feathering my reins out. Taking a hold smooth, even if he's stiff. Trying to bait him to settle onto my hands a little bit. When he starts to, I try to tease and let him tow my hands forward down toward his neck. I try to encourage that contact there. Now, if that creates a loss of engagement, I'll pick him up, get him gathered again, and then go back out. I'm just kind of testing that. If he's holding it himself, I'll just go with him and cruise. Pick up, kind of evaluate his reaction here. Every time I pick up typically, and this is this is like par for the course on a less experienced horse. The very fact that you add that input and bring that pressure on causes them to lose their framing and lose their rhythm. So what I'm trying to show him is, I'll pick up and bring that structure on here, but you need to keep moving through that. The very fact that I'm touching your face doesn't mean you lose your balance or have an abrupt change in the tempo of your feet. You need to accept that pressure coming on while maintaining this feeling. That was better that time. Good. Really got centered up nicely there. Balanced. That was really good there. I'm actually going to break him down. But again, pushing him up to my hands. That felt even better than yesterday. Good boy. Okay. That's important that we kind of play that little game of give and take on the circle. Again, we're trying to build a dialogue with this horse. We're trying to have a communication structure. And not just that, but to show him that it's a two-way street. So obviously I'm diligent about getting him soft and getting him to find center like we want and be in that collected position. But when he starts to kind of make an attempt at settling onto my hands and kind of going to the bit, maybe leaning on me just a tad, I let him tow my hands forward and find that extension and that release of bridle pressure. I kind of try to bait him into doing that almost on his own. And that's about, when he gets more confident to do that, that's what is leading into that seeking mentality that I touched on earlier. It's not just an abstract concept. It's the horse literally seeking contact or seeking pressure because they know it's where they actually want to be. So when he offers that, I'm basically allowing that to happen. I'm trying to create situations even where he offers that. For example, even if he's already soft, I'll still bring on some bridle pressure and kind of float my hands back like this and take the slack out of the rein to bait him maybe into leaning on me just a hair. And then as I let him pull me forward, he realizes that that's where the release of pressure is. The release is coming by going into the pressure, not hiding back away from it. It builds the horse's confidence to seek the bridle, and that's going to be really important for our rundowns and stops and our guiding and everything. We're eventually going to go one-handed, so we need that ability to touch his face. Let's do a little scaled up bending with vertical on this side. Just getting to that same feeling that we had on our smaller circles. And then we'll lope this way. Want that shoulder to feel like it's coming over the top. Means he's orienting his balance the right way. He's getting engaged. That's exactly what I want to feel at a lope too, except my inside leg will be further forward. My outside leg will be further back, but the general mechanics are going to be very similar. Coming through here, especially with that door at his back, he has a tendency to want to drift off the circle a lot on that area specifically. So I'm going to go through there one more time. I'm going to deliberately turn him a little sharper in off the circle than I would ideally like to, just to see if he stays with me. Okay, that wasn't bad at all. Let's do that one more time. I might circle in front of that door here, just to let that feeling linger for a split second longer. Come up over the top. Good. Very good there. He really dropped into a nice frame. So we're ready to lope now. Same thing on this side. Picking up, calling for that engagement, float the hands back. If I'm feeling tension there, just letting him run into that, staying with him. He finds his balance, then releasing. That was really nice, though, going through there in terms of how he was guiding. He stayed basically hooked on the circle. There we go. Same thing there. I feel a lot of honesty there. Picking up again. There, I'll release again. I'm baiting him to lean on me a bit. Pick up through here. Floating my hands here. Good. I want to feel him reach for that. If I can provoke that, get him to settle that nose onto the bit. That's the idea. Just a little bit wayward with that shoulder. Just going to stay with him a hair longer here than before. There we go. Yeah, go around that turd. Why use cones when you've got a pile of manure? That was really nice. I felt like zero hesitancy or change in his tempo there when I picked up. Just baiting him to lean on me just a hair. He's so light, he's almost too soft right there. I want him to reach for my hand just a bit. There, and let him tow me forward a little bit. One more time. Okay. Easy. Very good downshift right then. He stayed with me the whole time. There was connection right there. That was so much better than the last set of loping transitions we did. Now, granted, it's on the circle, so it's easier. But these are good signs. He gave me the right feeling just then. Now, you might say, okay, well, make it make sense, Jake. You're doing this circling, and if you feel him trying to drift off the circle, for example, Why don't you redirect his feet? Why don't you do something like steer across the center of the arena? Why don't you do your eyeball drill that you've done before and that's in the other videos? Well, the reason goes back again to what the horse needs mentally. No, regardless of what kind of horse it is, I'll never start doing those redirection drills until the horse has a baseline of where the circle is. Think of it this way. You can't correct something that the horse doesn't know was a mistake anyways. Meaning that if they don't even understand at a basic level where the circle is and they're not even hooked to it at a rudimentary level, then if they drift one way or another and you correct, it doesn't register because they don't realize that the reason you did that is because they left the circle. If I'm going to make a correction, especially one that involves redirecting their feet, they need to understand what the meaning is in relation to the circle. My eyeball drill or the slice the pie drill is for the horse when they bulge out and try to drift off the circle to the outside. My Mickey Mouse drill is when the horse tries to dump everything in too much and we push the shoulder out, right? But the only reason those things work is because we have a baseline of enough circling that the horse roughly knows where the circle is and what their job is. That makes the correction then mean something when they lean or drift in relation to the circle, and then you instantly get in their way and redirect. That's how that becomes mentally powerful. If the horse doesn't know where the circle is in the first place, it doesn't work. What I'm doing with him is I'm trying to get him hooked to that at just a basic level where I'm helping him a lot. You know, my legs, my hands are providing structure, and we're doing that give and take type of thing as we travel around on the circle. You know, I'm picking up, I'm releasing. Because later, when I get pickier about the circle and I go to make a correction, how bad of a problem do you think it would be if I go to make a correction? Let's say I do redirect his feet. I go to steer him left or right. And as he feels that rein pressure come on, he gets super tense about it because he never learned the skill of how to accept the aids coming on while maintaining the circle in the first place, right? So now, if I don't have that foundation, and then I go doing a lot of corrections, I've created a situation where the horse is so worried about the very fact that I'm putting pressure on them, they don't actually learn what the correction means. So you can see how all these things interconnect, like the layering or the syntax that we go through in the program. There's a deliberate design behind that. I'm not just pulling things out of my ass and just saying, oh, here's a good drill to do if you struggle with so-and-so. No, we're going a layer deeper than that. We're trying to give you guys some soil that good things grow out of naturally. And then you can prune, you can fertilize, you can water, you can thin out, you can do whatever to keep nurturing those things that are growing. But if there's no soil for the roots to grow in, you've got nothing, you know. So that's where we have to start. The soil is, how does he handle pressure coming on? In that context, when we're circling, does he allow it to happen? If the answer starts to be more of a yes consistently, then we can get pickier and really dial in that guiding. We can do more creative corrections or redirections as needed, and they won't break his confidence and they won't create fights. All right. What I'm going to do here is walk him out, cool him off a little bit, and we'll call it good for today. Good little session.